There is a widespread Western revolt against beta male open border liberalism. There is a widespread revolt in the West to close our borders, shrink inflation, and to restore national sovereignty. An alpha male renaissance. Breaking news today, Justin Trudeau is resigning as Prime Minister of Canada. Joining us now is Ezra Levant, a Canadian journalist and rebelnews.com. Ezra, I kind of want to say congratulations, because you guys have been investigating and criticizing for quite some time. I have a couple different questions I want to talk about as regards to how this all works. But first, walk us through this breaking news, Ezra.
Sure. Trudeau has announced that he's resigning, but not till March 24th. Now, he's resigning just days before he was having a caucus meeting where his own Liberal MPs were going to demand that he resign. So he's preempting them. But he's doing a sneaky move, Charlie. In a parliamentary system like Canada has, in Parliament, that's our version of Congress, the ordinary MPs, members of Parliament, can vote no confidence and bring the government down and force an election. So Trudeau has asked the Governor General, that's the King's representative in Canada, to dissolve Parliament. It's called proroguing. So not only did Trudeau not really resign today, he's kicked the can down the road almost 3 months, but he's dissolved Parliament so no House of Commons business can happen, no bills can be passed, no question period where people scrutinize the government. But mainly, Charlie, he's not letting MPs have a vote of no confidence. So in a way, he's suspended democracy just to give himself 3 more months of power and perks. So I guess 1 cheer, not 2 cheers, for 3 cheers for what happened today.
So just walk through the process of why this took so long. And do you believe one of the reasons he is stepping down is this Western trend that is rejecting leaders like Trudeau, Harris, Biden, and that are going towards leaders like Mulroney, Millet, that are going towards leaders like Bukele, like Trump, and maybe even Poilievre? Do you think that is playing into Trudeau's calculus here?
Well, that's part of it. The Conservative leader in Canada is pretty good. His name's Pierre Poilievre. He's pretty right-wing. I mean, right-wing in Canada isn't quite right-wing in the U.S., but Poilievre is excellent on economics and fiscal and monetary policy. He's gotten a lot firmer on immigration. Not Donald Trump firm, but better than any leader we've had in decades. He's talked about replacing the woke culture in our military with a warrior culture. And most importantly, in my mind, Charlie, Pierre Poilievre has a Trump-like approach to partisan media. He calls out reporters in real time. He has promised to defund our state broadcaster called the CBC. So I'm quite encouraged about Pierre Poilievre. I think the fact that he's strong and, you could say the phrase alpha male, that's sort of part of it. But I think Trudeau has had so many scandals and so much corruption, and he's been so badly behaved over the last months that his time was coming up. I mean, Trudeau has been polling so low. Last poll I saw put him at 16%. And his party MPs are worried they're going to be wiped out. So they were going to vote to kick him out on Wednesday, Charlie. This is Trudeau just buying himself 3 more months and leaving on his own terms. He was going to be fired on Wednesday.
Okay, so Ezra, I want to go back in time because we're recollecting on the January 6th and how far we have come. I think there's a similar type of moment that deserves recollection where you guys had your dark winter of the soul, which was the Canadian trucker incident, which, if I'm not mistaken, was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I can't quite remember.
February
Ezra, that is
2022.
Where we saw, okay, yes. Okay,
Sorry,
3 years ago. So, no, thank you. Similar type of time span where that, in my personal opinion, looking as an American into your country, seemed as if where you guys really turned a corner into Soviet-style totalitarianism. Walk us through this, Ezra, how those events unfolded and how you guys never gave up.
It was the most important civil liberties moment in a generation in Canada. All of our federal political parties were think-alikes when it came to the lockdowns and forced vaccine mandates. There was a no-fly list in Canada. If you weren't jabbed, you could not fly. You could not get on a ship. In the second largest country in the world, you couldn't fly. It was very authoritarian, and we had a weak conservative, a name-only conservative leader back then who was cool with all this. So who was there to fight for our freedom? No professors, no media, no political party. Independent truckers on their own started a convoy to Ottawa because they had been hit with a vaccine mandate, which is crazy. Truckers are the most solitary workers other than maybe a lighthouse captain. And to say that the truckers now had to get a jab to continue to work. So all these truckers started this long convoy to Ottawa, and it just grew and grew and grew. And soon it was 100 kilometers long, and people came out just to view it with their own eyes. It was the first real thing they saw in a year because of all the propaganda on TV. And because it was sort of leaderless and it was self-funded and organic, people saw this is the first real thing, and it started to embarrass Trudeau because they went to Ottawa. Now, Trudeau thought, this is my January 6th moment. I'm going to play the Democrat message track from January 6th. These are violent insurrectionists, domestic extremists. He tried all that, but it didn't work because the truckers were completely peaceful. They didn't storm any building. They had bouncy castles and hot tubs. And their niceness, their Canadianness shamed Trudeau, and he was starting to lose face. So then he pulled the emergency ripcord. Justin Trudeau brought in martial law. He declared a national emergency. We didn't even have that on 9/11, Charlie. This is the first time the law has ever been used. And it put Canada under a form of martial law. And he and his deputy, without any legal process, started seizing and freezing private bank accounts of anyone who they could find at this protest. Hundreds and hundreds of families, suddenly when they went to the grocery store, their credit cards, their banks were frozen. It was an outrageous violation of civil liberties. And who knows how far he would have gone. That was our moment. And I think Canadians looked into the abyss and said, whoa, what has happened to us, the True North, strong and free? And Charlie, if you look at the polls, that was when Trudeau started to fall. And the 2.5, 3 years since then. And so that was the most terrible and wonderful moment in my lifetime in Canada, when ordinary grassroots people stood up to Trudeau and stood up to the regime media. Charlie, all the media in Canada agreed with Trudeau on martial law. They agreed with demonizing these ordinary truckers. They wanted Trudeau to go further. They were happy to write the script the same way the Democrats did on Jan 6. So it was a moment where ordinary people, I would use the word the proletariat, because these were grassroots, ordinary, unfancy people. They stared down Trudeau. Trudeau blinked. And we are freer now because of it. By the way, last point, I mentioned that back then, Canada had a conservative in name only leader of the Conservative Party, and he told his MPs, you're not allowed to even meet with the truckers. Well, his MPs had a revolt, sacked him as leader, went to hang out with the truckers, and that's when the Conservative Party of Canada chose the real conservative, Pierre Poilievre. So the truckers not only saved Canada from Trudeau, the truckers helped renovate and rejuvenate the Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre, who is set to have the biggest election win in Canadian history if polls hold up, he is the party leader because of the truckers, Charlie.
So Ezra, 1 minute remaining here, and I do want to keep you for another segment. Do you believe that this can be the beginning of a more robust, conservative, common sense realignment?
Oh, yes. And I look forward to Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump working together constructively. Let's be honest, Trump and Trudeau hate each other. It is a mutual thing. And that would be bad for both countries, especially bad for Canada, because we're the smaller partner in the partnership. But you put a thoughtful, Canada first, freedom loving conservative in office in Canada and have him and Donald Trump have a heart to heart, you're going to get things done for both countries on trade, on border control, on national defense, on foreign policy. Trudeau has been pro-Hamas. Pierre Poilievre is not. You're going to see our two countries become best friends again, Charlie. I'm very excited about it.
So, Ezra, there's this talk of us combining forces, of Canada joining the United States. Is that the craziest idea you've ever heard?
It's not. I mean, listen, we used to be part of the British Empire together, so we do have a history. He was called British North America, I think. But there are some differences that I think some of the enthusiasts are missing. First of all, a quarter of our country is French-speaking Quebecers. Yet we have bilingualism in this country. That might complicate things. Another thing is I think most Canadians would probably be Democrats. Places like Alberta and Saskatchewan are more right-wing. They'd probably go Republican. But I don't know. I think that you could see this as a new California. Now, if we were to swap California, I'm joking about. Listen, I don't think that's. I think that's a fun thing to talk about and to daydream about. But the reality is, look, we actually have the world's longest undefended border. Now, Trudeau has made that into a problem. We're culturally very similar. We have a tight trade relationship. I think we have all the pluses of being one country with the pluses of being independent. I think that Canada can become great again and can be sort of like Batman and Robin. You guys get to be Batman because you got 330 million people, but we're Robin with 40 million people, but we are two separate things. I think getting Trudeau out of the way and getting back to common sense, I really think we're going to be your greatest ally, and
so
we're going to work together
here's
on
my
projects.
Idea. I think we create greater Montana and Alberta becomes part of the United States. Am I correct in saying that's good right-wing territory? Calgary, Edmonton, that's
that's where I'm
good
from
folks
for
up
sure.
There, right?
And that's where all the oil is, 173 billion barrels of oil in Alberta. So that's the thing. I don't know how that could possibly be hit with a tariff. That would be bad for America. We sell most of our oil exports, in fact, almost all our oil exports to America, and that displaces conflict oil from OPEC regimes. So we actually have a role to play in American energy security, which is why the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, is going to Washington for the inauguration. I don't know if you know that, Charlie, but Trudeau has been AWOL on this whole cross-border tariff thing. I think he wants a fight with Trump because he hates Trump. But the Premier of Alberta, that's the most conservative oil province, has been doing her best to keep the two countries friendly. Danielle Smith is her name. She's off to Washington. And I think that she's got the right idea. Keep the countries friendly, keep the oil and gas and other trade flowing, strengthen the border. She's gone ahead and set up sort of a provincial National Guard kind of thing. She's got drones and cops. She's taking Trump seriously. And I think she wants Canada and the U.S. to be best friends, as do I think most Canadians. I don't think we want to join America, but we love visiting there. And as long as we're on good terms and cooperating for freedom, I think everyone's a winner.
I love it. Ezra, God bless you. Thank you for all the work that you do here. What are some big dates we should be looking forward as in Canadian politics? You mentioned the resignation of Trudeau. What else?
Well, March 24th is when he turns over the prime ministership to some other liberal lackey who's going to get crushed. I think that's the big one federally, but we're watching January 20th because we're going to see what Trump does to Trudeau. Is he going to put those tariffs in? On April Fool's Day, Trudeau is jacking up the carbon tax, which is going to make us less competitive compared to the United States, which doesn't have a carbon tax. So I don't know. We're just waiting. We're looking at our clocks and calendars, waiting till Trudeau leaves and we can get on with a freedom-oriented government under Pierre Poilievre. We'll keep you posted, Charlie, because, Canada can be a laboratory for bad ideas, national health care, wokeism, but I think we can also be an inspiration for good ideas, and I hope we get back on that track.
Very good. Ezra, thank you so much. Canada has produced the greatest comedians of a generation. It would be good to get back to that. It's
Right
true.
on.
The
Take
greatest
care.
comedians come from Canada. No, it's a real thing. It's the greatest export besides lumber, oil, and comedians. Andrew
And Nickelback.
disagrees. Thank you.
And Celine Dion.
Well,
Take care,
one of
Charlie.
those
Thank you.
is very talented. Thank you.